say, so we can put all of this in its proper perspective and break this down for the listeners. Go ahead with it.
I don't know if I do because I don't read anything. So it really is a different way of not seeing, like you just said that, and I didn't know that until you said it. And, I guess in that, I hope that some way for future coaches, they're not put in that situation. The NFL, you're never put in that situation because of the calendar and because of the rules of movement within season. So I do hope for future people that's...
Lane Kiffin is a unique guy. He's one of a kind. The new head football coach for the LSU Tigers, who used to run the show at Ole Miss, left before the college football playoffs began. That wasn't really on him. Timing just worked out that way, and the school wouldn't let him stick around to coach the playoff games once he'd already agreed to take the LSU job. He had to make that call, so that's the spot he was pushed into. Anyway, he's back in the headlines because it's SEC Media Day, so coaches are sitting down with reporters and doing all that. Kiffin told the media he no longer reads negative stories or comments written about him, and he hopes future coaches don't get stuck in the same spot he did. Here's the man himself talking at SEC Media Day, worth hearing directly so it can be broken down properly for listeners. He said he doesn't even know if he still cares, because he doesn't read anything anymore. It's a totally different way of not seeing things, and he admitted he hadn't even realized something until it was pointed out to him. He said he hopes future coaches aren't put in that same bind. In the NFL, that situation never happens because of the calendar and the rules around movement during the season. He hopes it gets fixed for players too, since that's been an issue as well, one they already addressed by pushing the transfer portal date back. Earlier in the postseason, players were having to leave their teams mid-season just to enter the portal, so hopefully coaches get the same fix eventually.
I do hope for future people that's fixed so that you're not in that same predicament for players, for coaches, which really was a player issue too, and then we fixed that with moving the portal date back. That was more of an issue earlier in the postseason too, as you saw players having to leave teams to get into the portal during the season, so hopefully some way they fix it for coaches too.
Listen, here's the bottom line. When we talk about about Lane Kiffin, we got to put things in its proper perspective. He's a hell of a coach.
Bottom line, when the conversation turns to Lane Kiffin, things need proper context. He's a terrific coach, but he's also been repeatedly accused of lacking the highest ethics and morals. Some people have flat out called him a pathological liar. Paul Feinbaum, the mouth of the South, could give a whole lecture on the number of lies Kiffin has told across his coaching career, not just in college, but in the NFL too. Remember what Al Davis, the late Raiders owner, once said about him, calling him a pathological liar. Those might not be the exact words, but it definitely wasn't a compliment. It was inflammatory, and it's stuck with people ever since. Still, none of that erases the fact that Kiffin was one of the youngest head coaches in NFL history. It doesn't erase that he won at USC while dealing with heavy NCAA sanctions he inherited. It doesn't erase the best 3-year stretch in Florida Atlantic football history. And it doesn't erase that he reset expectations at Ole Miss by winning 55 games in 6 years, a mark only 4 or 5 programs beat during that span. None of that goes away. And it doesn't change the fact, said last year, and again this year, and it's proven true, that Kiffin should have jumped at the LSU job. Plenty of people were bothered by that comment about Ole Miss, but there's no backing off it now either. When you're a black player, and you hear the word Mississippi, that gives you reason to pause. That was said outright, and a lot of people were upset about it, until Kiffin himself basically confirmed it, to the point where the SEC nearly fined him for being so blunt about certain things.
He's a hell of a coach, but has been religiously accused of not being the most ethical and high moral individual in the world. Some people have called him a pathological liar. Some people, like Paul Feinbaum, my man Paul Feinbaum, the mouth of the South, saying, you know, he could sit up there and give dissertations on the amount of lies that Lane Kiffin has told throughout his career as a football coach, not just in college football, but in the NFL as well. Remember what Al Davis once said about him, former owner, now...
Think about that. Kiffin swearing off social media, saying he doesn't hear the criticism, doesn't know how he's perceived, claiming his son Knox talked him into quitting social media. Convenient, one could say, for a bunch of reasons. Very convenient timing. Kiffin's social media blackout started May 11, 2026, the exact day his Vanity Fair profile came out. According to that piece, Ole Miss recruits told him their grandparents wouldn't let them move to Oxford, Mississippi, and he praised LSU's campus for feeling, in his words, like there was no segregation. He apologized the next day, then disappeared from X and Instagram completely. His story is that his son dared him to step away from social media. The timing lines up a little too perfectly. Here's the exact quote from that Vanity Fair piece. He said recruits would tell him they liked him, but their grandparents wouldn't let them move to Oxford, Mississippi. And that never comes up with Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Parents this week were saying the campus diversity felt great, like there was no segregation, and that's what they want for their kid, because that's the real world. Sound familiar? This comes from someone, Stephen A. Smith, who actually visited Ole Miss's campus for a women's basketball game, invited by Coach McCrane and the university itself. He was treated first class the entire time, couldn't have been treated better or more warmly. The people there even invited him back for the LSU game, and as long as there's no scheduling conflict, he plans to go, since he promised he would.
Now deceased, but the former owner for the Oakland Raiders, and what he talked about when he called them a pathological liar. I don't know if those were the exact words, but it certainly wasn't complimentary. It was quite incendiary, and it stayed with a lot of people when it comes to Lane Kiffin. But it doesn't negate the fact that Lane Kiffin, he was one of the youngest head coaches in NFL history at the time. It doesn't negate the fact that he won at USC despite inheriting the burden of massive NCAA sanctions. It doesn't negate the fact that he had the best 3-year record in the...
But the reality remains, when you're black and you hear the word Mississippi, it gives you pause. There's no getting around that. There are photos of him there, with Trinidad James, with his daughter, with the coach. A lot was happening down there. First-class treatment throughout, and he's looking forward to returning. Still, when a job like LSU becomes available, you can't turn it down. You have to seize that chance. He brought his daughter and his buddy Spank, aka Gary Stephen, and they had a great time. Very hospitable, very grateful for how they were treated. But Kiffin had to take the LSU job. No question. Since arriving, LSU has 59 newcomers, 43 of them transfers, and they're already ranked top 10 in the country. They didn't make the playoffs, and haven't been in title contention since 2019, when Joe Burrow led them to a championship. But expectations have jumped now that Kiffin's there. The man can flat-out coach. The win total over-under sits at 8.5 for LSU and 7.5 for Ole Miss. He's old school. Looking at it honestly, you just have to shrug and say, yeah, Kiffin stepping away from social media is convenient. No blame there. And as for some of what he said, well, it is what it is. This isn't about singling anyone out or claiming anything's wrong with Ole Miss. That was the only visit ever made there, and there's no deep knowledge of Mississippi beyond what's been read and what history teaches. When people talk about the South and think about Jim Crow laws or segregation, Mississippi is one of the first places that comes to mind.
Of NCAA sanctions. It doesn't negate the fact that he had the best 3-year record in the Florida Atlantic football history, all right? And he reset the expectations meet at Ole Miss by winning 55 games in 6 years, and only about 4 programs or 5 programs was better than his record in 6 years at Ole Miss. It doesn't negate any of that. And it doesn't negate the fact that, as I said last year, and I said again this year, and it is proven to be true, that Lane Kiffin, obviously he should have ran at the LSU job. Ole Miss, a lot.
That Vanity Fair story blew up because it read like Kiffin was blaming his recruiting struggles at Ole Miss, compared to LSU, on the state's racial history. That's a loaded claim given Mississippi's past, understandably so. Confederate flags stayed in the Ole Miss stands until the school indirectly banned them in 1997, in case that wasn't known. Kiffin was smart enough to keep quiet about it the entire time he coached there. Why would he speak up while trying to recruit players to the school? Why create obstacles for your own success? He wouldn't. So he brought it up only after leaving for LSU, which came across as pretty classless, because now that he's gone, he'll likely have to recruit against Ole Miss within the SEC, putting himself at a disadvantage against a school that gave him a shot despite his messy history before arriving. He coached there 6 years, got full support, they wanted him to stay, and he's still talking about it that way. That definitely rubbed people wrong, understandably. But in the end, was he lying? Nobody can really say that. The population numbers make the contrast sharper. Baton Rouge is roughly 51% black and 36% white, while Oxford, Mississippi, is 66% white and 26% black. It's a completely different world between the two. The bigger story here is Kiffin, a polarizing figure, building a national brand, not just through football success but through his social media presence, suddenly deciding to walk away from it. And that might not be his worst decision.
Ran at the LSU job. Ole Miss, a lot of people were turned off when I said it, but I didn't back up one bit, and I ain't backing up now. When you hear Mississippi and you're a black player, it's going to give you cause to pause. I said that. And a lot of people were in an uproar about it until Lane Kiffin comes out and he acknowledges it, almost to the point where he almost got fined by the SEC for being so candid about some of the things that we're saying. You got to think about that. Remember,
Kiffin says stepping off the apps means he's no longer exposed to criticism, including any blowback from controversy he creates. The Oxford comments were real controversy, no doubt, and the SEC reportedly considered disciplining him over it. It reads like he blamed his old program's recruiting troubles on its racial history only after cashing a much bigger paycheck to leave, a check paying him serious money. So going dark on social media lets him avoid public accountability while still shaping the narrative through friendly, controlled interviews like SEC Media Days. That's all understood, but at the end of the day, it comes down to whether the man can coach, whether he can recruit well enough. Clearly the answer is yes, based on what he's being paid and the standing LSU has given him, putting him in a great position to do what he's capable of. That's what matters. That's what can't be dismissed. Whatever people want to debate about Kiffin, it all comes down to LSU's ability to win games. And looking at the SEC, watching Kirby Smart and Georgia bow out in the quarterfinals 2 years running, first to Notre Dame, then to Ole Miss, that's a real problem, a real challenge. The SEC could arguably be up for grabs. There's real doubt about Kalen DeBoer. He's had back-to-back 4-loss seasons, 9 wins and 4 losses his first year, 11-4 his second. Compare that to Nick Saban, whose last 5 seasons at Alabama saw him lose only 8 games total. DeBoer has lost 8 games in just 2 years. People want to make excuses about how the landscape has changed, but Saban succeeded regardless.
About some of the things that we're saying. You got to think about that. Remember, when you think about Lane Kiffin swearing off of social media and talk about he doesn't listen to criticisms, he doesn't know how he's viewed, he has no idea because his son Knox convinced him to get off of social media. Yeah, it's convenient, one could easily say, because of a plethora of things. Very, very convenient timing. Keep in mind that Kiffin's social media blackout began May 11, 2026. Just this past May 11th. It was the exact day his Vanity Fair profile dropped.
That excuse doesn't fly. Listen to DeBoer at Media Day. Keep in mind he's replacing Saban, a 7-time champion who won about 9 SEC titles, who won a title in his 3rd year at Alabama, the greatest college football coach ever, a no-nonsense guy who'd tell you straight that mediocre people don't like elite people, and elite people don't like mediocre people. That was Saban. Now here's his successor DeBoer, asked whether his tenure will be defined by winning a national title. He said he knows that's part of what's happened in the program, so he wouldn't doubt it, but he's not focused on that. He's focused on helping the program be its best and bringing out the best in everyone around him, from staff to players, trying to maximize what they're capable of every day. Does that sound like a champion? Seriously, does that sound like someone fit to follow Nick Saban? Just wanting to maximize everyone's potential? What if the talent around him isn't good enough? What if Alabama's roster doesn't measure up to LSU, Georgia, or Ole Miss? What then? Wanting to focus on maximizing potential? That's all he's got? This is a man who coached Washington to a national title game before losing to Michigan roughly 3 years back. This is the man who replaced Saban, the coach whose entire program was built around championships, no matter what he said publicly about trusting the process and getting better every week. Everyone knew Saban wore every game on his face. He didn't care if you lost. If you fell short of what you were supposed to do, if you didn't inch closer to perfection, he had an attitude about it.
Just reading from my research here, where he said Ole Miss recruits told him their grandparents wouldn't let them move to Oxford, Mississippi, and praised LSU's campus for feeling like there was, quote unquote, no segregation. He did apologize the next day, then vanished from X and Instagram entirely. You know, his whole thing, my son dared me, to bow out and get off of social media. The timing, bottom line is the timing lined up perfectly. And here was the exact quote from the Vanity Fair.
That was Saban, the same Saban who once sat down for a private hour-long conversation before addressing his team, who looked someone in the eye and talked about what you do after reaching number one. You keep going, because the goal is staying number one. Striving, pushing, never letting up, going all out. That was him. And his successor DeBoer, who lost 4 games last year, still carrying the aftermath of a 38-3 playoff blowout loss to Indiana, watching his team essentially wave the white flag and give up, leaving behind a whole offseason shaped by that beatdown at the hands of the eventual national champion Huskies. Alabama fans everywhere are still stinging from that loss. And his response...
Like the video, hype the video. We got a lot to talk about tonight. If you guys didn't hear the news, Cheryl Reeve made it her business to go off on none other than Sophie Cunningham. Shout out to Amy East. And she stated, love this shot of the three of us, 3-time Olympic cyclist, Igna Thompson. And that's her X account, It Thompson, former WDI USA president and DIA GD.
Smith Show on Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio. One more story worth covering before the break. In the WNBA, Sophie Cunningham, a teammate of Caitlin Clark on the Indiana Fever, made comments some are calling controversial. She's the player who got into it with an opponent a few weeks back, just pointing repeatedly in her direction. About a week or so ago, she made comments regarded as controversial and said she wasn't backing down from them, this time about trans athletes in women's sports. She went as far as saying she doesn't even think her comments were controversial at all. She shared her view on the polarizing topic in an ESPN interview this week, saying she felt a duty to protect young girls in locker rooms and in sports who shouldn't have to compete against biological men. Asked to expand on that quote with reporters Wednesday, she made her position clear, saying she said what she said. Here's Sophie Cunningham in her own words, talking about wanting to protect young girls who shouldn't have to compete against biological men, asked to expand on her viewpoint. She said she thinks. She said what she said, that it's basically common sense, that she'll always believe it, that protecting children matters, including young girls in that category, and she's standing by her words and always will. There's full agreement with Sophie Cunningham here, and with Riley Gaines too, standing with both of them. There are 2 daughters in the picture who don't play sports, but if they did, that would be the position taken.
Democrats board member Carrie Dansky with me at a rally. This is how women show up for our girls. And as you guys can see, they wearing them anti-trans shirts with basically saying that they standing with Sophie. And to be honest with you guys, this thing is really making headlines across our country, man. And it's damn near disgraceful the way people is just treating Sophie Cunningham. Now, this is Brandy Cross, and she's...
It's worth emphasizing what Cunningham said a bit further, that she'll always believe protecting children matters, including young girls in that category, and she stands by it and always will. She claims she's not political, but does have morals and beliefs she intends to stay true to. Asked whether her stance could hurt the trans community, she said she's not speaking out of hate, doesn't dislike anyone, and believes there's room for absolutely everyone, room to love everyone. She said getting people in the same room to talk usually reveals more common ground than expected. She's there to love, including loving biological women, and believes certain rights need protecting, and she won't fold on those beliefs, even though she's never said she hates the trans community. There's room for everyone, in her view. That deserves applause. The idea that disagreeing with trans athletes competing in women's sports equals hatred toward the trans community is completely absurd. Every word Sophie Cunningham said was right on target. There's no hate in it, only concern rooted in fairness. But what about loving girls who are born biologically female? What about their rights? Their fair treatment? Leah Thomas keeps coming up as an example, ranked 400th plus in the world competing as a male, then transitioning to female, and becoming #1. Anyone pretending that transition doesn't come with an athletic advantage isn't using common sense. What if a male athlete transitioned and tried entering the WNBA from the NBA? How dominant would that be? Everything needs proper context and honesty. There's genuine support here for the LGBTQ+ community and for civil rights and liberties. Full stop.
Now, this is Brandy Cross, and she's like blowing up on Twitter, bro. She's just blowing up in general. I believe Brandy Cross might work for Fox or Outkick. She stated, this isn't about the WNBA. Sophie Hall never said it was about young girls all across America who are helpless as politicians erase the hard-fought protections of Title IX protection that helped women in the WNBA and beyond reach the pinnacle of their sport. Now, Jamil Hill weighed in on it. Now, we know she has been very, very...
But fairness has to extend to everyone else, too. Supporting a trans athlete can't come at the expense of biological women. What did they do to deserve otherwise? Just like there's a category for men, there should be one for women, and a separate league or category for trans athletes. Want to swim, box, or play basketball? Compete against other trans athletes. Simple. Not wrong at all. Too many people are scared to say things like this out loud, and that fear needs to stop. Not every truth needs shouting from the rooftops constantly, but it shouldn't be hidden either. A society can't keep ignoring the clear unfairness of a male transitioning to female and then competing against women in their own sport. It's plainly unfair to women. Sophie Cunningham is completely right, 1,000%. So is Riley Gaines, who's been interviewed a couple of times, a sharp, impressive young woman. Talking with her has been genuinely enjoyable, and she hasn't told a single lie, just spoken plain sense. She's right, fully right, and so is Sophie Cunningham. The WNBA has other issues too, people directing real hostility at these players. The league and its players' union met recently. A separate topic worth covering on its own, since plenty of hate has been aimed at some of these women. Angel Reese caught some of that too, in her own way, including from a coach who later apologized, to be fair to that coach. But that's a separate matter entirely. Sophie Cunningham remains completely correct. The real shame here is that her comments are being labeled controversial at all. What's controversial about a young woman asking what about those born biologically female? What about fairness and equity for them? What about their freedoms, their rights, their protection?
Sport. Now, Jamil Hill weighed in on it. Now, we know she has been very, very vocal when it comes to anything regarding the Indiana Fever. She tweeted out, there has never been a trans woman in the WNBA history, 30 years in, but y'all keep hoping. This had nothing to do with the WNBA. Not whatsoever. Not whatsoever. Now, with all that being said, we have to talk about none other than Cheryl Damn Reed, the Olympic snub lady herself that snubbed Caitlin Clark off that Olympic team.
What's wrong with asking that? How is that controversial? It simply isn't. There's nothing anti-LGBTQ+ about this position. It comes from someone fiscally conservative but socially liberal, with the one exception where conservative instincts kick in being this exact issue: trans athletes competing against women. There's no place for that. That's a real undeniable advantage, and everyone knows it. It's not right, and credit goes to Sophie Cunningham for speaking up about it. She's 1,000% correct. Major developments are unfolding in the sports world right now. The situation involving Sophie Cunningham has split public opinion sharply. Some voices in the press are attempting to tie her remarks back to the WNBA specifically. Honestly though, Cunningham's comments were never actually about the WNBA at all. She was addressing the broader topic of men competing in women's athletics generally. It had nothing to do with the league itself, yet when it comes to the hometown favorite, certain people want to spin her words and paint them as hateful rhetoric. That's the wild part of this whole thing. Cheryl Reeve came out swinging hard at Sophie Cunningham. Jamel Hill also chimed in. Now a 3-time Olympic cyclist has added her voice to the discussion too. There's plenty to cover tonight. For anyone who missed it, Cheryl Reeve took it upon herself to publicly criticize Sophie Cunningham. Credit to Amy E. for flagging this. The cyclist, Inga Thompson, posted something along the lines of loving a photo showing 3 women together, identifying herself as a 3-time Olympic cyclist.
Herself that snubbed Caitlin Clark off that Olympic team. She has broken the damn internet. And I'm telling you right now, this is bad.
A week or so ago, discussing reactions to the Supreme Court anti-trans decisions.
Yeah.
We are now unfortunately seeing a trend of anti-trans demonstrations outside WNBA arenas. One scheduled for tomorrow. Just what have your reactions been to these demonstrations outside WNBA arenas, and what do you think you can say to Lynx fans who feel?
That came from her account on X. Standing alongside her was the former head of Woody USA and DIG Democratic Committee member Carrie Dansky, at a rally together. The framing was that this represents women standing up for young girls. In the photos, they're wearing shirts opposing transgender participation, essentially showing support for Sophie. Honestly, this story has been dominating headlines nationwide, and the treatment Cunningham has received feels genuinely unfair. Then there's Brandi Cross, who's been going viral on social media, possibly connected to Fox or Outkick. Her statement argued this issue isn't about the 1BA at all. Sophie never claimed it was, but rather about young girls nationwide who are left vulnerable as lawmakers dismantle the hard-won protections under Title IX, protections that helped women, including those in the 1BA, achieve success in their sport. Jemele Hill also spoke up, and she's consistently been outspoken about topics concerning Clark and the Fever organization. Her post noted that in 30 years of WNBA history, there has never been a single transgender woman in the league, despite ongoing speculation. Again, this whole conversation had zero connection to the 1BA itself. Now to the big story. Cheryl Reeve, the same coach who left Caitlin Clark off the Olympic roster, has caused an uproar online. This situation has escalated significantly. Reeve expressed that she doesn't believe the league's sense of safety is under threat. She said that's part of what she values about the 1BA, and that maintaining that environment matters. She hasn't witnessed any of the demonstrators behaving in a disruptive manner, though she acknowledged not seeing or hearing everything.
Outside WNBA arenas, and what do you think you can say to Lynx fans who feel like a safe space is being threatened?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we should feel like our safe space is being threatened. That's what I enjoy about the WNBA, and I think we have to continue to safeguard that. I don't think these demonstrators are not being peaceful, or not that I've seen, and I haven't seen all of it. I haven't heard everything that's happening, but everyone has a right to peacefully assemble, right? That's whether you agree with them or not. It doesn't matter. It happens every day, on the corner.
She emphasized that everyone has the right to peaceful assembly, regardless of whether people agree with the message. These kinds of exchanges happen everywhere, every day. She stated that having opinions within that space is fine, but she believes league leadership carries responsibility to ensure that sensitive topics don't create unsafe conditions or discrimination for players, and expressed confidence that the league office is monitoring the situation closely to preserve safety for everyone, calling that part of what makes the league special. On her personal views, Reeve reiterated her belief in inclusion, noting last week she'd said the same. She finds it troubling when people suggest transgender athletes represent the central threat facing women's sports, arguing that a segment of the country is blowing this into a much larger controversy than it actually is. She emphasized protecting transgender youth as a human rights issue, saying every child, regardless of gender identity, deserves access to sports. She acknowledged the conversation becomes more complicated post-puberty, in Olympic-level competition, or when scholarships are on the line, saying that's where reasonable people need to come together and find common ground, rather than simply saying no. She pushed back against the narrative suggesting biological men are entering girls' locker rooms, calling the implication that transgender women pose a predatory threat deeply problematic and inaccurate. She said the country will only see more transgender individuals as time passes, and she'd urged league leadership years earlier to develop a proactive stance rather than a reactive one. She hoped the league could lead in this area, acknowledging the science and medical nuances around hormone therapy are complex, but said she's taken time to educate herself and listen to transgender families, concluding that exclusion isn't the solution. The goal should be finding common ground and inclusion.
Right? That's whether you agree with them or not. It doesn't matter. It happens every day, on the corner and discussions, and it's not about agreeing. I think you can have an opinion, in this space. I think the commissioner and the league have a responsibility to ensure that any topic that could be problematic for players, what they perceive as to be unsafe or threatened in any way, or discriminated against. I think that's something that's fair for our leadership, and I'm quite sure that they have.
She added that this issue, while significant, isn't as large as other ongoing struggles within women's sports, including historical barriers around facility access, uniforms, and locker rooms that women have faced for years. She questioned whether the young girls holding anti-trans signage at games truly understand the actual challenges affecting them and how they themselves are marginalized, pointing out that gender equality remains incomplete, noting the Equal Rights Amendment still hasn't been ratified in all 50 states. She expressed hope the issue could be worked through thoughtfully, praising Minnesota Lynx fans as some of the most diverse and supportive in the league, and reiterated her wish that the league show leadership, allowing strong opinions while keeping the environment safe for everyone, agreement or not. Asked about an upcoming matchup between two high-scoring teams, Reeve joked her strategy was hoping the opponents miss shots and that her team controls the boards. She praised the opposing team's identity and pace of play, crediting their coach, and warned that failing to transition quickly from offense to defense would give up easy buckets, threes, layups, the works. She expressed confidence her team could defend well when locked in, while noting their offense has also been strong this season. Asked whether leaning further into their three-point shooting, given a high percentage, might cause complications, she said the team isn't against shooting more threes.
Something that's fair for our leadership, and I'm quite sure that they have eyes on and ears on to make sure that it's a safe space for everyone. And that's what makes our league beautiful. In terms of my views, as I said last week, I come from a space of inclusion, and the narrative that I think that is problematic is to suggest that number one, that transgender athletes are the biggest problem in women's sports. And I think
she explained their early season identity shifted toward attacking the paint, crediting specific players' ability to get downhill and finish inside, while another handles mid-range scoring. She said the coaching staff tries to play to each player's strengths, and in games where three-point attempts exceed 25, they're comfortable with that too, since the roster has real shooting ability. She noted the team has ranked among the league's top offensive units for most of the season and will keep adjusting, but stressed they never discourage players from shooting from deep. Shifting topics, she was asked about a past comment regarding playing WWE 2K with her son Oliver after wins, and whether she's a wrestling fan. She explained that was really her son's interest, noting his hobbies have shifted over time. She never expected to end up at Target Center for a WWE event, but came to respect many of the wrestlers as impressive athletes, though that's not really part of her life these days. Asked if she'd make a surprise appearance at SummerSlam that night, she said no, not this time, though she remains a fan of the athletes involved, just not her scene right now. Instead, she said she's currently into collecting squishy toys, joking that she and her family have basically cornered the market on every kind available. She mentioned a trip to Toronto with Oliver where they went hunting for squishies at a toy store, ending up at Toy Town and hitting the jackpot. Asked jokingly whether she declared the haul coming back through customs, she admitted she hadn't, and that they ended up getting stopped at